But yeah, good morning to all of you. Happy to have you here with us this morning. We might wait another couple of minutes for a few late attendees, but we'll see how it goes. Right, welcome. It's been a while, so we're very happy to see you all here. How everyone's doing well today. Hope everyone's enjoying the brief splash of sun in between the splashes of rain in the recent couple of days. Today we're going to talk about insight to impact, building a data strategy that elevates customer experience. But before we get into the topic and the lovely presentation that Tim has prepared for us, a couple of housekeeping rules. The meeting is scheduled for 45 minutes. It is being recorded. You will receive the recording after the event. We do have a chat option, Q&A and chat. We would encourage you to use the chat option for asking any questions and put any comments in there if you like, just to build a little bit of a feeling of a community for the CXPA members. We will pop those questions over to Tim at the end of his presentation, so let's not interrupt. But yeah, anything comes to mind, put it over there. My name is Agnieszka. You must know me at this point. Years with CXPA. We have other CXPA members with us today as well. And we always encourage you to subscribe to our mailing list on LinkedIn. So ask to join if you're not there already. And you obviously must know Tim as well, who is our presenter for today. Tim will be talking about the data. You know, back in the days, the data was just something that you collect, but now apparently you need a proper strategy for it. So listen, let me introduce Tim and let me read his bio because it is, while short, then still very impressive. So Tim has over 30 years experience in insights, data strategy and analytics. He is part of the CXPA committee group, so we're very happy to have Tim on board. He has held a number of senior roles at Ipsos, Nielsen, and also in W5 as a customer experience specialist. And now he is a proud founder of I2, where he can help clients to align data, insights, and AI capabilities just to build a strategy that they deserve. And I2 mission is exactly that, to help organizations to make a better decision by unlocking the data they have. The team works very closely with clients to understand their priorities, to asset the current capabilities they have, design the strategy, and which will be purpose-led, and to plan to enable that data to deliver the impact that we are all looking for. So without any further ado, and Tim, good morning to you, and the floor is yours.
Fantastic, and thank you very much. And firstly, I want to sort of really welcome everybody to the session this morning and to congratulate you on the first challenge of this morning, which was navigating the slight confusion on the Teams link. So thank you all for being able to join and being in the meeting this morning. So yeah, I'm going to really talk, as Agnieszka's just given the sort of the heads up in terms of the topic for today anyway. But as I said, I mean, my background is very much data and analytics. I've worked in and around research and insights my entire career. And I spent a lot of the last number of years in the customer experience space as well. So this is a really interesting topic area for me in conversation this morning, and really look forward to sort of sharing some thoughts with you and also getting your questions and feedback when we get to the end as well. But I'm just going to start because one thing that's really important, and this is, there's so much conversation about AI, data, analytics at the moment. And we can obviously see that you just look at LinkedIn, you look at the newspapers, you look at the news, anything, everything, all the conversation is about AI. There's lots of organizations and businesses that are trying to understand, well, how do I embrace AI? What do I need to be doing? And it's caused, in some sense, there's almost like a bit of an existential fear that what's it going to do? How's it going to impact us? But there's also that fear in terms of, well, if my competitors are doing it, well, why can't I? But actually, where I'm going to go back to, and that's part of the topic of today, and the topic is about data today, which is really what's underneath all of this. But really, to take it really back a level, the goal isn't about being data-driven or AI first, despite the subject of what I'm talking about today. The goal is actually to make better decisions. whether that is how do you provide a better customer experience, how do you optimize your products, your product strategy, how do you manage your processes and your workflows. It's all about actually using data and information to be able to make better decisions in that respect. So I'm going to start though with a couple of examples, and I'll start with one example from the customer experience space, and some of you may be aware of this, which is with Zalando. So Zalando, well, they announced at the back end of 2023, and they launched at the back end of last year, actually, a tool which really revolutionized in terms of their app, the role of discovery. And they built it within their app, which is using it's a natural language conversational shopping assistant. Where you can speak to the app and actually ask for, well, there's a couple of things. One is maybe fashion advice. So show me something to wear when I'm attending, there we are, there's a friend's wedding in Santorini, if you can see it on the slide. Do you have any dress recommendations? And there's a conversational assistant that will then come on and make recommendations in terms of what you can wear. There's a fit predictor, so actually leveraging customer data to really then try and understand, well, what size would work for you. So to try and take away some of that challenge, which is, well, I normally fit into a medium or a size 12 or 14 or whatever, but I don't know what it's going to be on this occasion. So it really to help in that respect. And also to give an idea in terms of, right, well, what would that look like? So with some visual suggestions. And it's something that they've really seen that there's been significant impact in terms of reducing the friction in terms of the retail experience. And also it's made the shopping experience, the online shopping experience, a lot more intuitive. And they have, but it's also able to look at the history, look at what else they've done, and build the personalized recommendations that have come in, from these people to be able to sort of offer the right suggestions, etc. And ultimately, the proof of the pudding here is that they've seen fewer returns and better conversion rates. So they've got hard data to demonstrate that this has worked. So that's one example where a retailer has really used data and an AI to be able to really revolutionize the online shopping experience in that respect. It's not always positive, and we'll come on to some of that in a moment as well. But we'll come on to that. But really, let's have a look in terms of from a CX point of view. Well, where does AI and analytics really offer opportunities from a customer experience point of view? And look, you will be aware of a number of these, but it's worth calling them out before we then get into the nitty gritty of these. But at the beginning is just exactly what we've seen with Zalando, which is that personalization at scale. Now, whether that's talking about cross-channel, whether it's also making those real-time suggestions as did in that case. But it's also something that's very personalized. It's more relevant for the person themselves. But then when you actually take a step back and go beyond the actual customer experience, the customer interface themselves, where else can data, AI, analytics help? And that's in terms of anticipating or predicting predictive customer insights. So how can you build churn prediction models? How can you understand also with your customers? Well, it's things like market basket analysis. Well, if they bought one product in the past, what's the most likely next product that's going to keep them interested and keep them as a customer, that really then starts working to support customer lifetime value? And there's obviously a lot in terms of smarter customer service. And I've actually come on to an example where it doesn't always work in a moment. Where AI chatbots come to the fore. And actually, generally, this is an area, when you think about customer experience, it's an area where people generally default to when they think about, okay, this is really what we mean by AI in customer experience. And absolutely, it's a key opportunity, and it is an area where customer experience really is at the forefront in terms of embracing AI. But just to this slide really is to demonstrate that there are a number of other areas in which AI, machine learning, etc., are actually at the very much opportunities. Going beyond that, from a CX management point of view, is the sort of feedback and sentiment intelligence, whether that is working with your CX voice of the customer programs, whether that is also incorporating sentiment data from social media, etc. And then moving further into process automation and efficiency. How can you automate workflows? Again, that's all about the customer journey behind the scenes, but then the customer journey in terms of what they experience as well. So the opportunities are huge in this respect. So excuse me, sorry, I've lost the slides briefly. So as I said, I did want to talk about some other examples, and one is Klarna. So Klarna is an online financial tool. It's I think they offer banking solutions in other countries. I certainly use them as a digital wallet myself. Klarna a couple of years ago really took the leap of faith in terms of how they were going to embrace AI, and they were looking in terms of how they can really overhaul their customer support. And they replaced they replaced 700 human support agents with an AI solution back in 2023. And that actually involved 75% of their support volume moving. That might be a familiar number, funnily enough, because often when you look at the expectations in terms of what you should get from bringing in chatbots, customer support chatbots, it does tend to be, well, it can reduce 70 to 80% of the support volume. Generally, you also will pair that with the fact that the human customer support team will then deal with the more challenging, significant issues that require more empathy. But it was really, as we've seen with other customers and other brands, something that was seen that it was going to be a real game changer. The subtle difference on this occasion was that the driver was not the customer. The driver was not about thinking about the impact on the customer or customer empathy. The driver was very much on cost efficiency. And unfortunately, on this occasion, it wasn't done well. The frustration really grew because the chatbots, not only were they maybe dealing with some of the wrong scenarios, but they hadn't been perhaps designed as well as they could have been, and they were actually given very generic and unhelpful replies, which particularly in an area like financial services or fintech is, and you've got some quite challenging conversations there that really do require some human empathy, that brand trust really suffered. And it actually came to the point that at the beginning of this year, they took a complete sort of about turn, and the CEO announced that actually they're going to be investing in the quality of human support for the future, and they've rehired a significant number of human customer support agents. So in that respect, the lesson here really, and for me, this is a theme that we'll come on to, is that what they really got wrong here was the purpose in the first instance. If the purpose is purely about cost, and you're not bringing the customer into the conversation, and you're not thinking about, well, what's the purpose of what you're doing? If it's just about cost, if you're not just looking at how can we actually improve the customer experience, then it will suffer. So as I said, particularly for situations that require high trust and require empathy. Another example, this comes from, there's a lot of talk actually in the fintech world again, actually, in terms of digital currencies. There's a country in Africa, this was again a couple of years ago, that launched and put a huge investment into launching a new digital currency. The plan was to reach 100 million users or more, so that sort of might give an idea in terms of which country it was. There's not that many countries in the world that have over 100 million customers, but they were really planning that this was going to be, that was going to increase sovereignty. It was going to make this a very modern, inclusive, digital-first offering to their citizens on this occasion. But actually, 3 years on, the adoption rate is less than 1% of the currency in circulation. There's no clear value or advantage. It actually doesn't fit. It has not been integrated very well with existing systems. And there's a real public distrust, which will be related to the fact that there's very limited education on this subject. So people get very confused then as well in terms of, well, what actually is a central bank digital currency, and in that respect, and well, what is that? How does that compare to my mobile wallet? Is that something different? So they really launched this with a great ambition and a great fanfare, but they didn't really understand what the needs of their citizens were in that respect. And to me, that reiterates a sort of an old adage, really, which is when you're launching a solution in search of a problem, don't be surprised if it doesn't work. And it's something that we do see too often. But again, it comes back to really, what was the purpose in the first instance? What does the customer need? What do the citizens need? And which is obviously a topic we would be very dear to our hearts from a customer experience world. So let me really then start looking a little bit more in terms of AI adoption. And this is some data from McKinsey earlier this year. And it's showing the sort of areas by business where those areas are embracing artificial intelligence. And the reason I share this one is because it is quite interesting that you can see that the more customer-facing functions, or those involved in servicing the customers, are those that are more likely to be embracing AI. And really that does reiterate that, look, it is important, it offers huge value, but as with the examples we've looked at earlier, with the Zalando example is one where it was done really well, but then with the central bank or the Klarna example, if it's not been done very well. So it's not just about embracing AI, it's about understanding how and having a clear purpose in terms of what you can do. But before we go any further, and of course the topic of today has been about data and data strategy. One thing that's really important and is to always bring it back to the fact that AI and data are two sides of the same coin. AI doesn't just learn from it itself. It doesn't learn from ideas. It learns from data, whether that data is numbers, whether it is unstructured information. And ultimately, when you boil this down, if the data is not in a good condition, then the AI won't be working very well either. So, and I'm going to go back to another old adage here, which is that this has been around as long as computers have been around, frankly, which is that it's garbage in, garbage out. And if I take that to take it back to what I said earlier, that this is about making better decisions. Bad data means poorly informed decisions. Now, I'm very clear when I think about this, is it's not just, that's not to say that it's the wrong decisions, because you can quite happily make the right decisions by, if you like, happenstance. But if you've got poor quality data, if you've got data equally where you haven't really understood the purpose of what you're doing, it leads to poorly informed decisions. So that then brings into the thrust of what I really wanted to talk about today, and in terms of, okay, well, what do we mean by poor quality data or poor data, bad data in that respect? And we actually did some research with I2 at the beginning of this year among business leaders in Ireland. that was something where we spoke to about 400 business leaders across Ireland, but equally have conducted about 50 interviews with business leaders that have been sort of 30, 45-minute interviews, really trying to understand where people are in the transformation journey. And really trying to identify, well, what's the difference between those that are further ahead, and what's the difference between those that are struggling? And really, we were able to identify from both the surveys that we conducted, but also from the interviews, there's really 5 core areas that you can group the challenges into. The first is about poor quality data and silos. So that might be that, like, you take a CRM system where you might have 10,000 customers, but perhaps actually half of the email addresses are very generic, or you don't know what they're or actually they're 3 years old, and the names and the identities of people have moved on. The other is in that respect is also silos, which is the fact that data exists, but it doesn't exist in a common layer across the business, so it's very difficult to draw conclusions. The thing that's interesting when you think about silos is it's often one of the biggest challenges that we think about from a customer experience point of view as well, is in terms of siloed thinking, siloed thinking throughout the organization. The middle piece here, which is the one that I've referred to already as well, which is about not having a clear strategy or purpose. And again, it goes back to the fact that there's an awful lot of initiatives that are done and shiny tools that are embraced without really having a clear understanding of why or what you're trying to do. So therefore, when you come back to it to try and understand the impact and the benefit, well, that then becomes, it's sort of, you might have achieved something, but it might not have a real impact in terms of the business. We also see that there are, from a people and a cultural point of view, challenges around whether that is a cultural resistance. That could be a sort of, that could be down to sort of, look, well, we work by, we know what works and that's what's always worked for us, so therefore why should we change? There might also be challenges in terms of data literacy. And beyond that, there are governance challenges, with good reason. There are huge challenges and concerns around the use and proliferation of data, whether it's been used, and from a data security perspective, and that impacts some industries much more than others. And finally, and this is actually linked to a lot of those other points, is that people have had bad experiences in the past. A project might have been launched, but actually the impact was quite difficult to see. And at that point, well, it was maybe that was because there was no clear purpose, or it was difficult to see there was a return on investment, or it was poorly designed on bad data, or we didn't have the right skills. And once you've done that, it becomes very difficult then to get any further momentum moving forward. And I do wonder, just taking that Klarna example again from earlier, the next time somebody comes up with a much better plan in terms of how they want to use AI chatbots to really revolutionize their customer support, how challenging will that one be to get it through, given everything that they experienced the first time around? So where does this bring us to? Is really, well, look, how do we make progress? How do we break through all of these barriers? And that's what I'm going to focus on for the next while. And this is where, when we take all of those challenges and those common pitfalls, we can group that into a data strategy framework, and that's how you get all of your pieces together. And I will say, actually, I'll add that when we talk about a data strategy is not a parallel strategy to the business strategy or to the customer strategy. The data strategy is the plan that you put in place that will enable your customer strategy, that will enable your business strategy. So everything that you have within your data strategy should be about making things happen and ensuring that you can actually build and implement what you need to do from a business point of view. And this leans very heavily, if you look on the previous slide, when I talked about those common pitfalls, you can see that within the pyramid that we've got here, these 3 layers. And if I start at the bottom in terms of the data foundations, absolutely critical in terms of anything that you are trying to do is that you've got good levels of data quality, you've got a strong data governance plan, policy in place, and understanding. You've got accessibility, so you're challenging those silos. And the reason this is really important is that if you haven't got that right, then it doesn't really matter how good your tools and your skill sets are, because you could build the greatest solutions, but if the data is poor or not optimized, you're not going to get the answers that you need. You're not going to get the value that you need to have a really good impact on decision making. And you take that further, as I said, with that sort of pilot paralysis, or the challenges of where ROI hasn't been proven in the past. If you haven't got that right, you're not going to get the leadership support to be able to move forwards in the future. So it really is critical to build from the bottom up. And it's not the exciting thing, unfortunately, is you need to get those foundations right. You need to have the data quality in good shape. So whatever amazing things you're trying to build, you look at what Zalando did in the first example I shared earlier. If Zalando were building that on poor data quality, or they didn't have decent data governance in place, then it wouldn't matter. They would have been making really bad recommendations to their customers, and that would have actually had the opposite impact from what they had actually shown. So let's take this back to customer experience and what this means from a customer experience point of view. And really, if we take some of those areas, so think about those weaknesses. If you've got inaccessible or siloed data, what that tends to mean is that teams rely on manual workarounds, or they go without in terms of using that information or that data. So what does that mean? It adds time, it adds manual work, it adds repetition of tasks, it brings in risks because you're using human and manual interventions to get where you need. But what that means from a customer point of view is exactly the same, is it brings delays, it brings this inconsistent experience. Well, what about low data quality or trust? Well, again, it's sort of the same challenge, is that decisions trust the data, or if the data quality is poor, people won't use it, so they default to instinct, which again, from a customer point of view, means that it doesn't really, the customer isn't going to see a consistent, something that makes sense to them. If you've got skill or capability gaps, if you've got misaligned leadership, all of those things create more challenges internally first, but they all come through and impact the customer. Ultimately, the customer doesn't see the benefits that they should be seeing. Their experience feels fragmented, and it doesn't offer the best in terms of what it could be. So really, where I'm trying to get to here is that even if you've got the best CX vision, if you haven't got the tools in place to be able to deliver that, if the data's not in good shape, if you haven't got the right systems and strategy to deliver the data, to then be able to deliver the customer experience, your customer experience vision, then that will have an impact on the customer. And that's where, again, going back to what I said on the previous slide, data strategy is not a parallel tool. It's not a technical project. It's a customer experience enabler. So there are 3 areas that we talk about in this respect when we're working with people to help them in this area. And the first is about discovery. It's about uncovering what matters, understanding what matters most when you're actually looking at the data in this respect. Then, and I'll come on to these in more detail in a moment, then once you've understood what matters most, exploring the art of the possible and trying to understand what you can do. How can you solve the challenges that you have? How can you ideate the solutions that will deliver the workflows, the data workflows that will enable you to deliver those customer insights that you need, and then putting the plan into action. So let's just look at that a little bit more in detail. Those 3 stages, in the uncover stage, as I said, is about what's getting in the way of better decisions and a better experience. And what we tend to do there is a deep discovery period, working with customers, where we're actually talking to the organization as a whole and trying to understand the internal organization in terms of what are the needs and challenges that you have. Talking to the customer experience teams, what are the needs and the challenges that you have, to try and see, well, where are the systems broken? Where is the quality? Where have you not got information that you need? That if you had information, if you had tools, you'd be able to make better decisions, to be able to, whether it's like, for example, with churn, that you've got, right, if I knew more information about my customers and their behavior, I might be able to build better churn propensity models, that sort of thing. It's also at that stage, it's really important that you actually have an assessment of the overall level of data maturity and data literacy that happens within an organization, because it's another common issue that people have is, and it's great that AI and analytics has got people dreaming about these amazing things that they can do, but where that falls down is they start dreaming about these great and amazing things that they can do, but they've not sort of taken stock of where they are at the moment. And that's really important, because you have to build a pragmatic path in terms of wherever you want to get. You can't leap from sort of just learning to walk to suddenly being able to fly. Within that discovery process, there's also quite and this is a really important part of it as well, which is once you've understood those needs and what the challenges are, is to map that process. And this, to be honest, is very akin to like process engineering mapping, but it's following the data. It's very similar to customer experience mapping, customer journey mapping, but it's following the data through the systems, and it's really seeing, right, where does it break down? Where are the challenges? Where's the manual work? Where can a tool help in terms of doing this? Where have we got duplications? What are the gaps that exist? So you can then build out that deep understanding of what the needs are, what the context and the maturity is for the organization, but also understand where things are, so that you can really then see, right, okay, that gives me the total context, the total sort of ground that I can now understand. And it brings you to the point where you can then start ideating and creating solutions. So now that you know where you are and what you've got to do, where can you make the visible progress that really starts moving the conversation forward? So that's where you get into, right, let's look at the art of the possible. What are the things that you can do? What are the things that people in neighboring categories are doing in other sectors altogether? What are they doing with data and analytics and AI that I can learn from? And then you get into, right, that's when you really get into the nuts and the bolts of the ideation, and how can you build plans? How can you then identify which of these are the quick wins? Which of these are going to be an evolutionary process? Involving the stakeholders in the process, so that you're actually involving the business in that design phase as well. And then, of course, it moves into the making that reality. How do you actually build out that roadmap? What do you need from a business case point of view? How do you actually move forward quickly and get some initial proof points? And really, the view here is always that you are trying to find a way to be able to move forward. This gives you a fabulous understanding about everything that needs to be done. But the challenge here is you can often find that you end up trying to boil the ocean. So that's why it's really important that you take that roadmap, identify the quick wins, identify what's important, and focus on those first. So I'm going to finish with just a few points today. And the first thing is that whatever you are doing, you have to start with purpose in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And it has to be the right purpose. Going back to that Klarna example, or the example of the central bank digital currency, the purpose was wrong in those occasions. They were misunderstood and they were wrong. It's also not about let's adopt the latest shiny tools. It's what am I trying to achieve? And then where am I at the moment? And how do I then get to achieve that? So it really is important within that. And that's why we spend so much time in that discovery phase, is to really understand what is needed and what are the hottest challenges within the organization so that you can prioritize. And then ultimately building that pragmatic pathway. It's not about, as I said, trying to boil the ocean. It's trying to understand, well, what is the first step? So if I'm crawling now, but I want to be able to fly, right? Okay, well, I want to be able to walk. Then I want to be able to use a skateboard, etc. So let's build that pragmatic pathway in terms of what you need to do. So look, thank you very much for your time this morning. I will stop sharing the slides, and I think we've got a little bit of time for any questions if people have them.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was amazing. We do have a few comments in the chat, more so than a question. Let's start with Jan. That was earlier to what you were talking about. Her point is about customer lifetime value. It's difficult to measure and calculate. And Jan says that she sees the companies think very differently about it. Would you agree with that statement, Tim? And why is that?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I think it's not the same answer in every situation and for every organization in terms of understanding customer lifetime value. But there are some solutions that I mean, I've seen some great examples. I mentioned one earlier, and I'll try not to get too technical on it, but if for anyone who's been in retail, well, they'll probably tell me I've given it the wrong name, but market basket analysis, for example, which is commonly used in retail, but what that's ultimately doing is it's using data to understand if somebody buys a product, what's the next product that is, or firstly, what's the best entry-level product for them that makes them a sticky customer? So looking at historical data, what's the first product that enables them to become a sticky customer? But then also, what's the second product? What's the third product? So if you think about that from a retail point of view, you can see how that logically works, and you can see how you can look at historic data to understand a model. Well, what are the things that create sticky customers that then start supporting customer lifetime value? But if you then take that into another sense, that could be what are the marketing communications? What are the services? What are the offerings that you provide to people? So I think you're right, Jan. It is challenging to do that, but I think what you can do is understand, well, what are the factors that impact it, that you can look at and use the data that you have to be able to understand that.
Thank you, Tim. We have more questions coming in, and I'm aware we only have 5 minutes left, but I'm going to read out the comment that Bernard put in, because he referred to the point you were making earlier on about the silos thinking. And it's always interesting to see what people take away from presentations. So Bernard says that it's clear that it's important for all of those and the end-to-end process that are brought together rather than design everything in isolation, as you were saying, Tim. And data quality is a key part for decision-making process. So, is that one of the 3 takeaways that you would also suggest for people to remember, Tim?
100%, completely. 100%. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that for me is why, it's really important when you go through this entire process that you involve the organization in this. That first step has to be talking to, and as I say, the organization, but equally customers, other stakeholders, involve people that are relevant and are important, but do not limit it. I mean, when we've been working with people, it's not just involving the organization, but it's different layers within the organization as well. It's not just involved, because if you just involve the section leaders, for example, then the person at the coalface actually might be the one who's having the section leader might not be aware that it's taken me a day and a half each month to manually faff around with Excel and Visual Basic in Excel to produce a report every month. But I am acutely aware of it because it keeps me awake at at night doing it or whatever. So
Right.
absolutely agree that this comes from working in collaboration and aligning stakeholders. But again, when I say a stakeholder, it's not just the senior people, it's the people at different levels of the organization.
Lovely. That's a great segue to the next question we have. Just before I move on to Terry's question, you got a point from Bernard for a very pragmatic approach in this presentation, which I think we all as CX professionals are looking for. Now, listen, exactly to your point, Terry is asking, I think it's a great question here. Do you think it's important for CX professionals to lead this out? Are you seeing this being led somewhere else outside of the CX professionals? And essentially, I suppose the question could also be, who in the organization should be responsible for that strategy?
Yeah, and look, I think it comes down to, so there are some, it depends, from my point of view, we're helping people with data strategy more generally, but from a customer experience point of view, when you've got let's be honest, as I said earlier, the data strategy and this, in terms of what we're talking about here, is the enabler for the customer strategy. So in that respect, for the customer experience team to own this, I think is a really important point. If you are trying to understand how you can improve the overall customer strategy using data, then I think you do need to do it, because it also comes into, and I saw there was another question later about purpose.
Yes.
It's ensuring that clarity of purpose in the first instance in terms of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And to your point, exactly. So Jan was asking, how do you define a purpose? And I wanted to keep this question for the end, because, oh my God, can we not spend 45 minutes of another webinar discussing how do we define the purpose? But that is food for thought for everyone. Charlotte, there's another question from Charlotte, and might be one of the last or the second last here. Excellent presentation, Tim, well done. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on using synthetic data where simple sizes can be low as a way of building a robust sample? Do you feel that could be accurate? Great question, very hands-on. Wow.
Absolutely, that's a fabulous question. I absolutely think synthetic data, I can't say it, but synthetic data offers opportunities. But I think you have to look at it for what it is as well, and you have to understand. I've seen another example of something I'm working on at the moment where it is being used. People are using synthetic data in terms of models that are working towards data, get this right, data fusion in terms of clean energy. So look, there is absolutely no doubt that synthetic data has a role in the absence of larger samples, but I think you always have to understand what you're working with at that point. That's always going to be the watch out for me.
Nice one, thank you. Well, listen, guys, we are on the dot. It's 10 o'clock, and I'm thinking, first off, let's thank Tim for his presentation and amazing work. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for showing up this morning and putting all of your questions in there. Now, I would want to say, if there are any more questions, Tim, are we happy to extend by 3-5 minutes if there's anything coming in?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't think I'm going to be thrown out of the meeting room. Not yet, anyway.
Anyone who can stay with us, fantastic. You're more than welcome to do so. Let me see if there's anything else in the chat here. No more questions except a lot of thank yous to you, Tim. Maybe that's it. Okay, doesn't seem to have anything else coming in. So it could also be that you answered all the possible and potential questions while you were presenting, Tim. So well done to you. Now, where can we find you?
Where can you find me? Well, you're probably on about one of the five emails I sent out in the last 24 hours trying to get the Teams link out. Is a great place in the first instance. But yeah, I2, I'm based in Milltown, so I'm in Dublin. But yeah, my email address, which was on the previous slide, which we'll send out the slides as well, tim.farmer@i2.ie. And yeah, you can find me easily enough through that. So.